but it's a resurrection day. Resurrection day meaning this is when Jesus rose from the dead. So we come as a special occasion to remember it. Some churches will have sunrise services. We, of course, celebrate bunnies that lay eggs and things like that. Very biologically correct celebrations. Rites of spring is associated with it, of course. But it's the idea of the world coming back to life. We've got buds and flowers beginning to form on some of the trees around our neighborhood. We've got leaves that are beginning to show in the bosque. It's a beautiful time of the year. It's a time of renewal of life. But there's one particular incident that occurred in history that makes this a very special time. It is that particular special time we want to celebrate this morning. I want to remind you of something as we go through this, though. Jesus died almost 2,000 years ago. Now, you know how I'm figuring almost 2,000 years ago? It's 2013 right now, right? Add 20 years to that and subtract 2,000, it'd be AD 33. That's the traditional time of that we designate as being what we believe is when Jesus died. Because he was about 30 when he began his ministry. His ministry lasted about 3.5 years, give or take a little bit. And that meant about AD 33. Without going into the details of mistakes in the calendar and whatnot, let's just leave it at that. It's almost 2,000 years ago that he died. Nobody has ever referred to him as the late Jesus. Did you ever think about that? I hadn't. Don't know why I hadn't. I think about other weird things, but I hadn't thought of that. Nobody in history, not even unbelievers, nowhere has he ever been referred to in the past tense. Why is that? Because he's alive. He is the living God, isn't he? He is unique in that regard. You and I are the result of a living God. Now, I know it's not logical. I didn't say it was. I can't stand up here and give you the John Locke logic and show the reasoning behind it that says absolutely this is something that happens all the time, because it doesn't happen all the time, does it? This is a unique event in history. It's a unique moment in time in which God intervened in the world for our benefit. And it's that resurrection that is that benefit. You say, well, how does the resurrection of Christ benefit us? We're going to go through some of that. But notice that he is a living, real being now. Not just in the past, but now. So, whoops, there are all kinds of buttons on this thing, sorry. So where is he now? It's not really a rhetorical question. You can answer it if you want, but where is he now? Right hand of the Father in heaven, isn't he? Right hand of God. I thought I'd get a picture of that and put it up, but I couldn't get one that I thought was appropriate. There's all kinds of fanciful paintings and whatnot of that. But where is he now? Hebrews chapter 12. Looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. That's where he is. By the way, how many times is that spoken of in the Scriptures? I didn't look it up, but if you want to sometime you can. Where is Jesus seated right now? At the right hand of God. Where is Jesus right now? At the right hand of God. Why is it the right hand, not the left hand? Right hand's considered the favorite hand. Sorry, you lefties out there. It's true. Right-handed people are correct. We're not in our right minds, but we're correct. We know that. Okay. My brother's left-handed. My dad is too. Romans 1. Concerning his son who is descended from David, that's the lineage of the Jewish faith, according to the flesh, declared to be the Son of God in power, according to the Spirit of holiness, by what? By his resurrection from the dead, Jesus Christ our Lord. What if Jesus had never been resurrected? It would be evidence that he wasn't who he claimed to be, wouldn't it? It would be evidence that he was not the Son of God. But by his resurrection, he proved that he was the Son of God. Now I say he proved it. How is he resurrected? We're going to see that later. The Father resurrected him, he says. And God's going to raise us from the dead as well. We're going to get into that in a little bit. But the idea is this resurrection proves something to us. It demonstrated, it showed, it recognized that Jesus was the Son of God. How many of you in here are sons of God? I've asked this before. Yep. Should be most of us. How many of you are daughters of God? It's a modern thing. It's one of those things we use as a generic referring to everybody. Men, mankind, not womankind. It's a man thing, never mind. All right. Jesus was resurrected from the dead, and he is the leader, if you will. In fact, one translation even calls it the pathfinder, the one who broke the trail ahead of us, if you will, the firstborn of all creation. Jesus was resurrected from the dead, and we will be too. The question is, how will we be raised, and to what will we be raised? In John chapter 5, Jesus, in talking to the disciples and to the people, spoke of this time that is going to come. The hour is coming when all who are in the tombs will hear his voice. By the way, how will they hear his voice if they're in the tombs already? We're not talking about a natural occurrence, are we? This is supernatural. A dead ear does not hear airwaves the way we do as live ears sitting here this morning. This is a supernatural occurrence. All that are in the tombs will hear his voice and come out. Now, we've got this big, fanciful movement of shows on TV, The Walking Dead and Zombie Apocalypse and others of my favorite choices of viewing material. But the zombie thing is just a big fad, right? Are we talking about zombies coming out of the tombs? Decayed flesh, walking? No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about resurrection. Resurrection means the body comes back to life. That means the body is filled out again. That means the soul is actually put back into the body, however you want to describe it. Somebody says, well, what if the body was burned in a fire and it's no longer a body? I know some friends that actually go through this long, lengthy argument concerning cremation being wrong because it destroys the body that God's going to raise from the dead. Anybody in here a chemist? Okay, we've got a couple of chemists in here. Can you guys explain to us what happens to matter when it burns? It's still there, isn't it? Now, does it all stay in one place? Hopefully not. It gets dispersed into the system so it can be used again, right? It's nature's way. It's God's way, if you will. What happens if you bury a body in the ground? It decays. The chemicals in it get dispersed so it can be used again, right? I know we don't go out and dig up bodies very often in this society anymore, or at least you don't. I don't. But the body decays. How does God then take that decayed matter and make it alive again? Anybody have a scientific explanation for that? Absolutely not. Very good. There is no scientific explanation for that, is there? There is no logical explanation for it. There's no reason for you to believe in the resurrection then, is there? That's what people in the world would like to have you believe today. They say, this Jesus thing, that's all hogwash. He was just a man, he went up on the cross and died, and he stayed dead. Or as Dan Brown said, no, he got up and had family in France later, Hogwash. Jesus died on the cross, was buried, and if his body had stayed in that tomb any longer, he would have decayed like every other person who's died, and his body has decayed in history before or since. But he didn't stay in the tomb. Not because his disciples stole him, as the story went around at that time was, but rather because he became live again. He is risen. He came back to life, not because of science, not because of logic, not because of reason, but because of God. God intervened. We have this day, a day of resurrection, because we know that God interrupted things, changed the flow of nature, and says that body is going to live again. And he did. And he appeared to witnesses over and over again. And we're going to see some of that as we go along here. But I want you to notice here, he says, all of us will hear the voice in the tombs and come out. But notice what happens. Those who have done good to a resurrection of life. Those who have done evil to a resurrection of judgment. Which would you rather have? I heard a child say life. Very good. It's kind of an obvious choice, isn't it? Do you want the judgment of God? I've heard people say that I just want God to be fair with me. No, I don't. I want him to be merciful. If I wanted fairness, I would go ahead and give up and say, okay, God, I give up. You win. Or you lose, however you want to look at it. I'm never going to make it. But good, gracious God, he has given us his grace and his mercy, and that's what we want. Do we want the resurrection of life? Of course we do. But everybody's going to be resurrected. You mean not just the righteous people are going to be resurrected? No, everybody is. Why? Because God said it was going to be that way. We're not going to go to sleep and just never wake up. Have you heard that before? I've heard that before. I think it's kind of silly. I mean, if we're going to have a resurrection, might as well have everybody resurrected. I don't know exactly why God chose to do it that way. I can explain some things, go into the theology of it, but how many of you understand theology anyway? Guess what? Neither do we. And when I say we, I'm referring to us as your teachers, the preachers. We say we do sometimes, and in some places we really do. But you know, theology is man's way of describing what God did. It's not God describing it. What we prefer to do is just go to the Scripture and let God describe it. So here we are. What about after the resurrection? We have a resurrected body now. Jesus was resurrected. What happened to him? Interesting thing. First of all, Jesus, in answering a question that was asked of him on the day of questioning, said, here's this woman who's married. Her husband dies, and according to the law of Moses, she has to be taken by the brother of the husband who died and raise children in his name. It's part of the lineage thing, part of the tribal thing, and it was the way the law was written. But they posit a scenario in which there are 7 brothers, and each one of them dies, none of them having raised any children, given her any children in the name of the brother. So whose wife is she going to be, or whose husband is she going to be married to in the resurrection? That's what the question was. Jesus says, the sons of this age marry and are given in marriage. But those who are considered worthy to attain to that age and to the resurrection from the dead, neither marry nor are given in marriage. I can hear some of you right now. No wonder they call it heaven. Now, of course, I would never say that. You heard about the old man that was, he and his wife were celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary or something. Preacher was impressed, and he asked him to stand up in service and say, how does it feel after all this time? He says, like 5 minutes. Underwater. Marriage aside, after the resurrection, we're not given in marriage. There is no marriage after the resurrection. Jesus tells us not to expect that, not to worry about that. It's not because marriage is bad. It's that marriage is for here. Marriage is for the fleshly bodies, the temporary bodies. I like to think of it personally as God made sure it was temporary by making sure we died before it got too long. Marriage was never intended to be an eternal thing. You've seen some of these stores that pop up and people talk about eternal marriage or always. And, you know, that's pretty nice and sweet and romantic, but it's just not true. I wish it was. Our marriage is actually with Christ and God. And we are the ones that are married in a spiritual sense to the Father himself. We are his children. All right, there's no marriage after we die. After we are resurrected. How about dying again? Just going through Luke 20 here, we're going to hit a couple of quick points that Jesus makes in Luke 20. He says, they cannot die anymore. Now, why is that? Well, when the Apostle Paul talks about the resurrected body in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, he says, I don't know what it's going to be like. I just know it's going to be different. I know, for example, that it's not going to be susceptible to disease, to the fleshly problems that we have in our world today. It's going to be a body that was designed to be eternal as opposed to this body, which was designed to be temporary. On your own, you can look up 1 Corinthians 15, read that whole section on the resurrected body, and you'll be amazed at some of the stuff that it says. But it's one of the things that we need to recognize is it cannot die anymore. By the way, when you are resurrected, do not expect to die again. Isn't that nice? I think it's great. I don't know about you, but every once